Hello, my loves. Welcome back to another episode of Or So She Thought, a podcast where we get to have an intimate conversation about Black mental health in Canada. I am so glad that you are here. This is your first time listening. Welcome. If not, welcome back. Please make sure you rate, review, subscribe on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And if you haven't already, please share this episode and this podcast with someone you know who needs it. So on today's episode, I have my good friend, Debbie Bermudez, and we're going to be chatting about resilience and mental health. Debbie was born in Edmonton, Alberta. She is a mom to two beautiful little girls who are actually not little anymore. They're 11 and 3. She is fire. And that fire catches on to everyone that she meets. She is passionate about life, all things parenting, physical and mental health, and personal growth. She's the owner and operator of Ginger Movements, a Zumba studio that allows its clients to build resiliency and wellness through active living, movement, and mindfulness. She has a heart that loves her family deeply, blood and chosen, and that love just allows her to deep dive into topics like resiliency. And as she has close personal connection with mental health, specifically as it relates to diagnosed disorders. So Debbie, I know your time is valuable, and I know talking about mental health isn't an easy conversation to have. So I thank you for taking the time just to share your story and speak openly about your journey.
Oh, no, definitely. It's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me today.
Yeah, thank you for coming. So if you wouldn't mind sharing a bit around the research that you've done, kind of what brought you to this point of being here today.
Oh, my goodness. Okay, well, we will try and keep it under 7 hours. I'm pretty sure your listeners are not going to want to hang out that long. I'll just start off with completely honestly the point that I'm at, and it's happened many times through my past. I'm just blatantly lucky and blessed and just so amazingly pleased to be able to be here and share time with you and just kind of hopefully give back in some way. So in terms of my history, there's a long one. We'll do a quick little review. I'm mid-40s and I have amazing family, you've already said. I'm a single mom to two lovelies. And the trip to get here was a little bit crunchy at points for sure. Grew up in Edmonton, did lots of traveling and stuff. And on those travels, at one point, I was living in Taiwan, and I actually met the man that I ended up marrying, who was originally from Chile. I'm sure that's another episode all on its own. But we ended up, having a long distance relationship and then getting married, and eventually he came to live with me in Canada. And it was passionate and romantic and exciting and pretty well right away. There were some things that I was noticing that were a little bit maybe not conducive to a super healthy relationship. And these were things like, the desire to control my movements and wondering where I was at. And it's just overall just like a generalized jealousy and distrust. And you can write these things off. And I think this is one of the biggest things that I've learned. And I'm pretty sure anybody who's lived a few decades, we look back and we're like, oh, I should have seen it. And I should have seen it. Yeah. 1,000 times over. But I always go back instead of, and it took me a while to get here, but I always go back and look at who I am. And I look at the things that I've gotten from those relationships, whatever those relationships were. And I wouldn't change a thing. I really wouldn't change a thing. So I was loving this man and I was dedicated and committed to building a life with this man. So I think in that you look to forgive, and I'm by nature a caretaker, and I want everybody around me to feel safe and seen and loved. So I bent over backwards, and I think a lot of women are going to be able to connect with this. You change yourself. You become less fire, as you say, and I love that description. But that's exactly it. You dampen yourself, and I became less. I call it now less Deb. All my passion for life and my love for friends and family and just adventure and activity and growth, it ended up being put on the side because he needed more, or I felt like he needed more, and it didn't matter, and it really didn't matter. And as time progressed our relationship, things got more difficult and more blatant, but you would still ignore it until finally, really, what happened one day is, which we found out later, was a psychotic break for him. And the basics are, I guess, that he really just had a serious, a full disconnect from reality. We were at home. It was probably close to 1:30 in the morning. And I don't know how many people actually know this story, because it took me years to actually speak about what was happening in my relationship. But it was 1:30 in the morning and I was asleep. I had to work the next morning at like 5. I was a shift worker, just the career that I was in. And he turned on the lights and he was sure that he had heard somebody in bed with me, that he was sure that there was somebody up here.
Right.
Yeah, and he was raging and it was terrifying.
Yeah, for sure.
That there's no other word. And it was also a good wake-up call for me. Not that it still took a long time to really fully understand and really take in what was happening, but that level of rage for something that obviously wasn't happening, and you could feel that disconnect in him. And young and wanting the best and all these things, I took him to the hospital and I said, you've got 2 options. You're either a complete asshole, pardon my swearing, or you need help, and you get to pick which one those are, and I will support you, whatever that means, but it's happening now. So we went to the hospital, and it took us going to the hospital a couple times over the next couple years, until it happened again. And he got on medication and different diagnoses and all these things. So a lot of it was outpatient. And in that time, I got pregnant and we had my first little monkey, and gorgeous and amazing, all those things. But even during that period, lots of things would happen that I couldn't breastfeed her away from him. He needed to be there, because if I was awake and he was asleep because he was working, I was on maternity leave, then obviously something else was happening. So I think the stress of, it was pretty heavy, to be completely honest. And you combine it with trying to raise your child and trying to keep this baby safe, and you just do your best. And I think a lot of us get to that point, whether it's with an unhealthy relationship or struggling with mental illness, because sometimes that is heavy enough. And when we are struggling to just find enough to live your daily, there we go. Okay, can you still hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Perfect, I love it. So I always flash back to that period, I guess, multiple trips back to the hospital, events that now when I look back, I can't even believe I took as necessary or normal or whatever it is. And the things that now flashing back, it was so obvious. He would hear voices that weren't there. He would see and believe that cameras were in shadows following us. He would tear apart our basement looking for the voices and the people who were watching us. He had, these grandiose beliefs that people in his work or at my work were plotting against him. And as time went on, most of these thoughts and these beliefs were focused on me. And eventually the psychiatrist that we ended up dealing with, who was amazing, by the way, University of Alberta, outpatient and inpatient, their program, I cannot thank them enough for as much as they tried to do for him. I'm sure at the time, I'm not sure how appreciative I was. I think I probably just looked very lost, but was the realization that I was his safe space because I was consistent, because of all these things. But it got to the point where he believed I was trying to poison him, and he believed that I was the source. I was possibly had a demon. There's all these things, and I'm sure there's it was things that I kept learning as would go on. And it was interesting because once you commit to supporting somebody, and once you commit to making it through and being the best possible person you can for your partner, I think you get on that road, and when there's no other energy left over, you are in survival mode. So to get off that track was very, very difficult. And actually, for better or worse, he was one of his periods where he was hospitalized because, again, he'd had a psychotic break. And unfortunately, this time, he got violent while he was in the hospital with me. And it was something that I think I needed to have happen. And he had to very loudly and very publicly tell me that he no longer wanted me near him, and it was because he was in the middle of a psychotic break, and it was horrifying, I'm sure, for him. And I can't even imagine what he was experiencing. But for me, as the mother of two girls who had been trying to keep it all together, it was a pivotal point for me to decide that it's time to take care of them.
Right.
And it wasn't, I think the biggest thing that I dealt with at the time was the realization that this is actually what he would have wanted if he was in his right mind.
Right.
I truly believe that this man loved me. I truly believe that he loved his children. He just could not be present in a way that was safe for us.
Right.
So that, so that started. I mean, of course, there's lots more details and all those things, and it wasn't a clean shift or any of those things. There was years of therapy for my oldest child, and therapy for me to figure out what it was that I needed to heal, because it wasn't what I expected. I had expected to be angry at him, and I couldn't be because it wasn't his fault. So I didn't know where to put those feelings.
Right.
And I think the other thing that came up for me that I was really surprised, it was the realization after some time, was that I was mainly angry with myself. And it was taking that on. Yeah, how could I have let it get to that point? And I asked myself that for years. How could I have let that happen? How could I give away the core of who I am to support another person? And I came to the realization that, and I still believe that, is I think a big piece of who I am, a big piece of my core, is that caregiving aspect, which is why I love my children so much, which is why I love supporting and trying to be the best version of a parent, of a partner, and as a friend, is because it's not just like I'm a giver, it's because it feeds that piece of me.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. And I think that's a big piece of what pushed it. I could be what he needed. And in the end, the realization is you can't be what someone else needs. You can only be the best possible version of yourself. And that still rings true today.
Right.
So yeah, so it was good. So we pushed through those things, and we still have our ups and downs and stuff, but I've got two healthy girls who have still managed to need to address a few crunchy bits, and it's all the usual stuff that our children have to deal with and that we have to deal with as parents, whether we're a single parent like I am, or a single person and co-parenting with somebody else. They all have their own little struggles. So for us, we got to a really healthy place. I opened my business for not just for Zumba and stuff, which was like that fun kind of outlet to keep activity and to connect, kind of that community piece, because again, I love teaching people. I love being active and fit. But the second piece of my business was actually just diving in and learning how to guide people, in their mindfulness practices. And the main start for that one was my oldest daughter. So she was still struggling a lot. She was old enough to have seen some of the things that happened with her dad, unfortunately, and they affected a lot of how she processes her own emotions. And it's much better now, but for a 5-year-old, it was very overwhelming. So we had all the great supports and these amazing community agencies and stuff, and we managed to get everywhere we needed to be. And I think this is another thing that when we talk about mental health for any community group, whether it's marginalized groups or even just our community as a whole, that is one aspect that I think is still true today, is that unless you know where to look, or you're able to find the strength to advocate for yourself, even in North America, even in Alberta, even in Edmonton, I feel like we need to find those supports. And this is actually one thing that I'm just so excited to see with the program that you're running. And a lot of other individuals, I see that they're starting to step up, is to find those resources and help share that information. So thank you for that. Just as an aside, it's a gift that, but it's true. It's a gift that so many people really can benefit from. It's just helping people find what they need. I happen to be that person who's a huge advocate for myself. So I'm very lucky in that, but So anyway, we did all that search and stuff, and I was still finding that there were tools that were missing. And there were tools that I needed and tools that my daughter needed. So I've always been really active, always been into fitness and competition and all those things. So I remember that in terms of improving my competition, whether it was running or swimming, in the past, I used to be a competitive swimmer, like probably half the people we know, was using like visualization techniques to reduce stress and to prepare for events and things like that. I really wanted to delve more into that, more for the healing aspects and the sleeping aspects. So I said, you know what? Let's do this. So I jumped in and I got my first certification for kids and youth. And honestly, Jyening, it changed my life. It was like I had all these great intentions and I was doing everything I could as a parent and as a person, but I'd ran out of tools to add to my toolbox. And I still had a 5.5-year-old who would crawl into my bed because she just couldn't settle and she didn't have the tools to self-regulate herself into calm. And it was a couple of days of certification, and then it was months and months of practice and developing my own solid practice until I eventually opened up that arm of the business. And then I continued and I got certified to teach adults and create programming. And it's been an amazing journey. But I think one of the things that is maybe one of the big reasons that we wanted to talk today in terms of resiliency, I think before I would see that the breakdown of my marriage, maybe not even the breakdown of my marriage, I think the realization, the breakdown of a relationship that can't be maintained because one of the members is so incredibly ill that they needed more than a partner and even just the resources that we had available to us. I used to see that as my call to resiliency. That was my big push for creating these programs. Part of what we do in my business is I provide classes, but to be honest, the Zumba part is a lot of activity. I do things with community groups and schools. And this year I've just reopened again for a few different reasons, which we'll get into, but I'm kind of taking it slow and I'm doing, sessions and all these things. And it's been great to get back out in the community and be active again and use it as to be honest, part of it is just me getting back into being that person for others and for myself. So it's been wonderful. The mindfulness piece, I used to see the relationship and the breakdown and having to come back from that as a parent and as a woman as what was the core base and foundation for the resiliency through mindfulness program that I created with my company. It's primarily I try to give them as seminars because they're more of a starting point to provide tools for individuals to create their own mindfulness practices on their own. Yeah, it's good. I've done it in a few different kind of scenarios. To be completely, I guess, candid about it, I find that these seminars very much are usually called upon or called for when there's a group of individuals who've reached a point where they're looking for the same thing I was looking at before, and that's just more tools. Just more tools to enrich their life. And sometimes what I'll do is I'll find that it's never the same scenario, but it's almost always someone looking for something else. They're missing something, and I can't love that part enough. We can find a benefit, not just through the practice of mindfulness, but really focusing on mindfulness for resiliency in every walk of life. And that's one of the things I love about these programs that I've created, is that individuals can really take from it what they need and apply it to their own life. So it's been really, really good. However, then things also change. And as we go through waves of our life, I'd gotten to kind of that peak of that, and it was great. And I was, this is a couple years back. This is probably until the end of about 2019. I had regular clients buying this, and I have a full-time gig anyway. This is like this, I call it my side gig. But I was very actively giving seminars a couple times a week. If it was really, really busy, sometimes I would have to take time off and I would dedicate to schools and things like this. And schools, generally speaking, love the Zumba part, but as high schools and things like that. So it was going great, and it was morphing into things that were very specialized to different units and different agencies. And end of 2019, I gotta tell you, it was like this golden, amazing. I was in incredible fitness. Like I was in probably some of my best like the best level of fitness I've been in. Almost always have always had like that. I was that mom who would train for a month, and I'm like, look at my 4-pack, look at my 6-pack. I'm so strong.
I remember that about you. Yep.
And right. So just that it wasn't ever the training for check me out my bikini, which is always a nice bonus.
Yeah.
It was that ability to handle anything. And I always made jokes about it, but I would explain it like I feel like a machine because I have the energy to give, not just to my family, but to give to others. And I found that was like my superpower was I could take anything, I could push through anything, and I could help you through anything. And I really, I'd inherited that kind of as my identity. And that's great. And so we're at the 2000, okay, stick with me. We're at end of 2019. I'm super strong. I'm super motivated. My kids are in a great place. My business is going great. I'm feeling fantastic. And I'm feeling like I'm really doing something meaningful. And just, again, you wake up and you're just like, I'm so blessed to be at this point. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And you want to keep it going. And then you realize suddenly I'm teaching all these classes and I'm tired. And why am I tired? I'm like, you know what? I'm really, really busy and I'm getting older. So it must be partly that. And then a couple months go on and then Christmas and I'm in January and I'm starting to get more and more tired. And I couldn't figure it out. So I started reducing my personal training. And I would just keep the classes that would allow me to bring in some extra money and to run my business because they fed me spiritually, they fed me emotionally, and they've put extra things on the table for my kids, which is my focus. And then I got to March and I was just really tired and I was starting to not feel good. And I've always known that I had a genetic disorder or genetic issue, I guess, with my heart. So it's something called a bicuspid valve, and I was born with it. And traditionally speaking, I guess the basic way of looking at it is you've got an aortic valve where the blood flows out of your heart. And most people have 3 valves which close it. I had 2, hence the bicuspid. And what that means is there's always a bit of a flow back. So I've always had it monitored. I've always taken all the precautions. But one of the things that you look for, knowing that at some point in my life, I would probably have to have this fixed. Not everybody does, but it quite possibly. But you're going to be looking for things, Debbie. And for years, I'm looking for those things. You're going to not be able to run. You're going to be faint quite often. You're going to have chest pains. You're going to have all of these symptoms that you look for. Well, I didn't have any of those things. I didn't have chest pains. And I think probably owing a lot to my stubbornness, even tired, I would push through. So, so I would have those checks and I couldn't, but then by March, I wasn't just feeling tired, I wasn't feeling well. My head, I wasn't as clear-headed and things. And then COVID hit. So we have me not feeling great, the beginning of a pandemic.
It's compound, right?
It's a compound issues for sure. And just trying to do the best. So what you do is you jump into mom mode. You're like, okay, how do I keep with the information that I have at hand, how do I keep everybody safe? My parents in their 80s, my children need me, and I'm not feeling great. So what you do is you stop. And I still worked and I still taught and I did all those things, but I tried to start limiting our contacts. And then it took a while to get in to see my cardiologist because it's COVID. So things are being stopped and our health system and everybody's thinking, we're going to just stop for 2 to 3 weeks. And then everything will start again because this pandemic's only going to last a couple weeks.
Right. Oh, we thought wrong.
All right. So I waited. And I waited longer and it was just not able. And I was getting more tired, but I was still pushing through because I didn't have chest pains. I didn't have any of those things. So it couldn't be that. Maybe I'm just getting older. Maybe I'm just pushing myself too hard. And maybe it's all of those things because we can always explain away things until you finally get in to see your psychologist, your cardiologist, and they do tests. And they finally measure and you get to see what your aorta looks like. And it used to be that the closest I'd ever come to, even going from like a mild worry to like a moderate was when I was pregnant. It was because I was probably close to 200 pounds and carrying light. So fair enough. My heart was working a bit extra.
Yeah.
And basically we almost always returned back to normal after it. So I wasn't too worried. But as soon as my cardiologist saw the results, honestly, I walked in and I had classes that night. Actually, I think I had a party, like a Zumba party that night, like a 2-hour. I got 40 people booked, and I'm gonna go, and it's gonna be deep, like it's gonna be amazing. And I did the testing and stuff, and I'm sitting in the room, and my cardiologist walks in, and he says, "Okay, so it's time." And I knew, I was like, "Well, tell me more. Time for what?" And I wasn't really processing. And he goes, "These are your test results." And the test results basically are just measuring the how much my aorta had shrunk, and that is indication for them saying, you know what, it's starting to get to the point where it's going to risk damaging and thickening that side of my heart.
Oh wow.
Which is where it just doesn't work so well anymore.
Yeah.
So I was at a measurement that was far beyond that baseline to be from moderate to severe. Wow, so I was well within the severe point. And that day I walked out, and he was amazing. Again, you know, our health system is under attack right now. I really do believe it. I don't think we have the resources in Alberta. I don't think we're affording the care and the concern to looking at a long-term plan for it. And I think with COVID, our desire to return to normal is leaving a lot of individuals still being hospitalized, still looking at long-term issues with care and health. And I mean, that's again, probably another session that you're going to deal with somebody else. But I truly believe that our healthcare professionals want the best and they're working hard. And at this time, he did as much as he could. And I walked out of his office with orders to not work, with orders to not teach, with orders to not get off my sofa until we could figure out how to get me on an operating table.
Wow.
And that was another shift. And I didn't know what that meant. I knew all the words, but I think I was very honestly in shock. But I will give him credit exactly where credit is due, is he knew exactly who he was talking to, because I needed him to tell me the one thing he told me. And the one thing he told me is, okay, I get that you pushed through. I get you're doing all these things, because you are that person who is out for a run and you collapse and you die. So it's that to you, because you're not getting chest pains and all the things. For whatever reason, you're not having these symptoms. So you need to listen to me, because you're not listening and you're not able to listen to your body. And I needed him to tell me that, because, well, you've known me for a while and you know me, and I would have pushed through and I would have kept going. And that's exactly what would have happened. So kudos to this man. And this doctor. I went home and I listened, and I realized as the months went on, A, with COVID, I couldn't see anybody. B, with COVID, my kids were now schooling at home. And because I couldn't risk getting sick, because I just couldn't, there's no leeway for me to get sick. We didn't see anybody. We didn't see anybody for probably about 4.5 months. We had groceries delivered, and my kids are amazing. I still am so grateful to them. They didn't complain once. And they dealt with a mummy who, as things got worse and my heart continued, to get worse before I could get in for surgery. I went from having, afternoon naps to waking up and getting them food and going back to sleep for 4 or 5 hours in the middle of the day, and then sleeping another 10 or 12 hours at night, and nobody could help us because of COVID. And my children were champions. Let me tell you, these young ladies, I can't, not once did they complain, not once anything. And I feel like emotional just thinking about how lucky I am to have these kind-hearted young ladies. So anyway, we got to the point where we realized that with my parents, as long as they were willing to isolate from all other contacts, which of course they were. I don't even know if it was me. I think it was more grandparents wanting to see their grandkids. Then we started to be able to see them, and we went on, and it took I think about 7.5 months, and they got me booked in. And finally, September of 2020, I was able to get in for open heart surgery to get everything fixed. So the shift for me, this is the longest story ever. I'll try and make it quick. But the shift for me that happened there was prior to the surgery. And a very honest, part of what they do is they're great. They prepare you and have the opportunity to have all these conversations with all these people who have either been through it before, or they're the caregivers of individuals who have to go through it. And there is always the chance that you either A, don't make it to your surgery, or B, you don't make it out of your surgery. And it's not this doom and gloom kind of focus. It's this very realistic awareness that you need to be prepared. And if you're not prepared, you need to prepare for your children. And it was the first time, no matter what had ever happened in my life before, I knew that I could make it through. And it was the first time I had to realize I don't have control anymore.
Yeah. That's intense. Yeah.
I didn't know how to deal with that. I could always push through anything.
Right.
And it was a hard learn to have and to take, but it opened up a lot of things for me. And it really, really did. And I had to look at my life as though it would maybe end on this date, or that there was a date, but I couldn't imagine a maybe date. So in my head, that date, the surgery date, was either going to be the most amazing shift, or it was going to be something that unfortunately was where we're at. So I had to get my affairs in order, and I had to ensure that my children would be cared for by somebody else if something happened, and that I was picking the right person, and that my children felt safe no matter what would happen. And it was interesting because I had to have these very honest and loving conversations with people in my life and with the children themselves, obviously, in relation to their age, but just to know that no matter what happened, they'd be okay.
Right.
And those are hard conversations to have when you are the person that they have always depended on.
Yeah.
But it was good. It really was good. It helped me reset myself to be this person that I am today. And if I hadn't gotten through, it would have set them up to be safe and become still amazing, loving, wonderful young ladies. So there was no loss. And it ended up being, once everything was set, a sense of relief.
Okay.
And I hadn't expected that either. So I knew they were going to be okay, and I could just focus on what I needed to do as a human being. I got as much time with my kids as possible, with my parents, and I just went into the surgery like I do with everything else. Okay, we've done everything we can.
Right.
And for whatever larger being or larger force that people tend to believe in, I just left it up to them. I left it up to him. I left it up to everything. I said, you know what, I can't control what happens here. So I just have to go into this being the best possible, most loving version of myself, because that's what my children will remember. Look at me getting all emotional.
Oh,
I know.
I love it.
Yeah, but I made it through, and it was great. I had great care, and I learned a lot having to make those choices, because I also just kind of assumed that within 4 or 5 months, once my chest bones had reconnected and done all those important things, that I would of course get through, and it would be amazing and quick.
Yes.
Super quick. That by about halfway, middle of say summer 2021. Yeah. Obviously, the pandemic was going to be done. Yep. I was going to have my 4 to 6 pack back.
Yep.
And my tight little booty, and life would go on as it had gone on.
Right.
Because that was my goal set, and that's where your head's at. You're going to go back to what was, and that great point. Yeah. End of 2019, ladies, this is our goal.
Yeah.
And so I think, as everyone else has seen, as life goes on, we haven't gotten back there.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be honest, I don't think it's entirely a bad thing. And I'll explain why I think that. Obviously, by the middle of 2021, I wasn't back to my physical fitness. I wasn't back to Deb. What I would call Deb. I wasn't back to Deb. Okay. I was still carrying some extra weight, and I still had a really sore chest, and some of my muscles were shorter, and I wasn't teaching yet, and we were still in the middle of that. So we're layering all of these different things, and it it didn't, it wasn't conducive to an easy recovery, but it also wasn't a horrible thing because it also carved out this time for me to really sit back and look at what was I missing before, because I'm still here. So if I'm still here and all of these things had to change, what was it? What can I learn from this, and what can I offer back? And I always preface everything, what can I teach my children? Because if I'm growing into the woman, my best possible version, my goal set has to be that my children are able to grow into a woman, into women that they can be proud of. So I have to be the woman that's modeling those things for them. And that was really badly stated, but yeah, that's what it is. I have to be the woman that I hope they one day become. And that's what it is. And that's in all parts. So I learned to ask for help when I got really sick, because I learned I can't do it on my own. And that's huge. That's a big thing. And it's freeing. It's also humbling. I needed to learn to be more humble. And I hadn't ever thought I wasn't, until the day I realized, well, you know what? Somebody who believes they really have control over everything, there's a little bit of ego tied to this. I think if we're completely honest, I really do. And it's not a bad or a good thing, but I think it's a very real thing. So I chose to not let that part go. And I still, to this day, I'm trying to remind myself to ask for help and to offer help the same way I would, but to let people help and take care of me. And I like that because I think it's a tool I can offer my children to be open to it. I think they're going to be happier as young women, as human beings, if we start to, if I'm able to model that sharing behavior as opposed to the I am woman, hear me roar. And I think the second part to that is I realized my unwillingness or my inability to accept help through my whole life was tied to very much that belief that the other person wouldn't come through. And I think that shows a lack of trust in other individuals. And I have to believe that if you don't offer that trust with an open heart, they're not going to step back and offer it back to you, because if you don't feel trusted, you're going to pull back as well. And I think it's very much a two-way street, a two-way relationship that I wasn't fostering. I was only willing to be the giver because I had control over that. And getting sick forced me to let that go. And it's been good. It's been really, really good. My relationships we've talked about this a little bit, are less. Now there's fewer people that, since the pandemic, it really is still ongoing. There are still considerations and concerns that we need to take. There are people that I haven't kept in my life, and there's no anger, there's nothing. It's just these are relationships I can't foster while still needing to keep all of these important bits to myself. And the relationships I have are deeper, and they're better, and they're loving, and they're just great. And I can't be more thankful than I am in these relationships with my friends, with my family, and even just people that I engage with for work and for projects. And all of these things are starting to come back and open up. And there is a beauty in being completely vulnerable and open and genuine in all things. And all of those things are just bigger and more real now. So coming back in a very, very long track to the concept of resiliency. I'm here today. And when I look at the programs that I created before, and I look at the life that I'm creating now, when we look at resiliency, I think we have to really focus on whatever point we're at right now in our lives, whether that's the pre meeting some guy in another nation phase, the post got married, don't know where I am as a human being, but I'm going to be at another hospital at 3 a.m. phase, or that morning when you wake up 2 months after having your chest popped open and realize that you can finally breathe without having a chest pillow on, and you're still here,
Right.
and your children are still healthy and they're sleeping.
Yeah.
Well, let's be honest, for me, my 11-year-old was probably my 10-year-old at the time. She was curled up beside me because she was so worried about my health.
Yeah.
And all of those things. But you realize every morning when you wake up, there are things that are there and they're meant to be there. And from wherever we're starting, whatever point we're at, we can grow and we can start to rebuild those foundations, and we can choose who we're going to be. And I'm not the woman that I was at the end of 2019. And it's in some pretty big, hilarious ways. I'm really active again. I'm back to training. I go at 4 a.m. now because I'm still anxious about having lots of contact with individuals inside. That's my own deal.
Yeah.
And I'm back to practicing a regular mindfulness practice for myself, which is great. I'm still carrying extra weight. I have not seen my 6-pack since about November of 2019. And one day maybe I'll see it. I'm thinking I will eventually. But I am waking up every morning and I feel incredible. And I wake up and I feel connected to my family and my children. And I wake up, and here's the biggest thing that I think, the focus of resiliency and the focus of just recovery of myself as a person and re-meeting who I am, is that I'm a better person now because I'm choosing to be a better person. And it's not that necessarily I was a bad person before, but I have the opportunity to really look around me and see what I was missing. And what I was missing was the willingness to see where my weaknesses were. What I was missing was the willingness to see where I wasn't honestly holding space because of my own insecurities. I wasn't giving the fullness of a relationship or myself to some of my friends because I didn't have it in me to really address what they were going through. So I'm on a quest, I guess, to learn how to do that better, so I can get back to my friendships more fully. So I'm willing to and more capable of having those crunchy conversations.
Right.
And the biggest thing that keeps coming up for me is, am I really seeing what someone else's experience is? Whether it's my relationships with people of color, whether it's my relationships with people who are less able than I am. I thought I knew what it was like to struggle with weight. I thought I knew what it was like to struggle with flexibility and functionality. I thought I could understand, but I can't. And I couldn't have understood until my body no longer worked. So empathy, it truly isn't the same thing as fully understanding. So it's about relearning how to have and foster those relationships with people who have different struggles than I do. And helping them see that they're valued and loved and respected, and how we can give back to each other. And this is a very long way of saying I don't regret a moment of anything that's ever happened in my life, because I am more myself. I am more Deb in this very moment right now than I've ever been before. And it's because all of those things had to happen to bring me to this point. And I'm really hoping that if we talk again in 6 months or a year or in 5 years, I'm going to continue to grow and become the best version of myself to be able to give back in a bigger and better way. And I think that has to be the right way to approach our daily. It has to be. Otherwise, I wouldn't wake up feeling just so freaking incredible every morning and just excited about what the day comes, what the day's going to be bringing. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. That's so powerful. As you were talking, I'm like writing down notes. I need to come back to this. This is so good. So one of the things that you had mentioned, which really struck out to me, is that as women, we are doers and fixers, right? We think we can fix, we think we can do all the things until something major happens. And then life is like, you thought you could do all the things? You thought you could fix this? Yeah.
Very much.
Right?
I think we take it into ourselves. I think we create our personalities and our personas. And I say persona very specifically because we have a desire to be seen just as much as we have a desire to do these things. I want to be seen as kind and a giver. And I think we very much promote that and look for that in our society.
Right.
Yeah, you're a
Yeah.
good woman.
Yeah.
Well, what does a good woman really mean? Well, I mean, it can be these
Exactly.
things, but it has to
Yes.
be, it can also mean a whole bunch of other things for
Right.
sure.
Yeah, for sure. And we
Yeah.
have to allow space for our uniqueness and authenticity to exist. Like when you were
Yes.
talking, when you were dealing with the situation, and I love the language that you chose. You didn't choose language that gave the impression that having a certain diagnosis is dangerous, because that's the image that we get, in the media,
Oh,
is
yes,
that
for
these diagnoses
sure.
are dangerous. But the language that you chose is that he couldn't have this diagnosis and serve us in a healthy way. And
Yes.
that's so powerful, right? To have that. Yeah. And you didn't have the opportunity in that season of your life to be able to speak up for yourself, because you're like, crisis mode, we need to deal with this and help him get the help that he needs.
Yes.
But it didn't allow you the space to really flourish and speak up and have your own voice, right?
Can
Yeah.
I just
So
stop you for a second?
yes, absolutely.
I can't tell you how much I love that you see this, or that you heard this.
Yeah.
A big thing that I'm noticing now, and I'm wondering if it's true, and I think it might be just because you picked up on it, I think that's happening now. I think I needed to have my own forced pause to really have the opportunity to break it all down to the core base and to build things back up. So I like that you saw that. I think that's very much, I think I had kind of a pause
Yeah.
until I was able to be granted or forced or allowed, required to take that time
Yeah.
to figure out exactly what it was that needed to get healed. So thank you for that. No, I love that.
Yeah.
I love that view of it.
Yeah, yeah. And that's so awesome, because it's so natural. And I think especially in a situation where you're a single parent, you're like, the whole house rises and falls on me.
Yeah.
We fall into that role, right? Where it's
Yeah.
do all the things and nothing's going to stop us unless it's a 2x4. And these
Yep.
situations were those.
Exactly. Yes.
Could you speak more about how you used it for good? Because I find a lot of people get stuck in their own narrative, right? They experience something in life and they get stuck. Either it's stuck that, I'm a divorcee, or I'm a single parent, or
Oh, yeah.
I dealt with this, where you were like, yes, I went through a season where I had an ex-husband, or I had a husband at the time, who was struggling with this and challenged with this particular journey or diagnosis.
Yeah.
But I didn't stay stuck there. I'm going to use it for good. What can I learn from that? I feel like resiliency really speaks
Huge.
Can you speak more on that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. I honestly believe that resiliency is a word that is applicable to applicable to most people, whether it's something that they're seeking or they would benefit from, or they live by. And for me, especially during, this recent period term, sure, but when it ties into a relationship and things like that, I think it goes back to who I need to be for my children and who I need to be. And that maybe just sounds too mom focused, but I believe that we feed into and we guide ourselves with the things that are at our heart.
Yeah, absolutely.
And which truly mean the most. And that's actually where I developed my belief and my still ongoing kind of check, or my foundational check for myself, is that I look at what I'm doing with my life, and I look at how I'm growing and what I'm choosing. And nobody's perfect. Don't get me wrong. There are those nights where there's maybe one too many glasses of wine by the fire, and I'm like, well, so I'll be walking up carefully. And there's no perfect. There's no perfect life. Somebody's gonna have an opinion, but you can't live by those opinions. So in that time of life, so let's look about a year after he was, we finally called a formal separation of the relationship. He couldn't be in the house because I couldn't protect the kids, and I couldn't protect myself, and I couldn't protect him. He just wasn't well, and we'd have periods of psychotic outbreaks, and unfortunately we started to see where he couldn't control his physical body in a way that would keep everyone safe. So let's look a year. Let's look a year in the future, and this speaks very much to the choice of resiliency, but also the choice of how I move past that. And it's not. I'd like to say there's something magical and beautiful, but what it really was is we got to the point finally after a year that, and I say about a year because after the time when my oldest finally had a good 6 or 7 months of, to be honest, weekly therapy under her belt and under our belts, because it was not just for her, she's a little one, but it was for me, and it was for those kind of things. And my other little one was so little that the biggest thing that she needed was just to be close to mommy, right, and to be present. So a lot of the talking part was with my oldest daughter, and to really focus on her. So I was still very much in that survival mode, making sure I was getting them everything that they needed. And I say about a year because that was the point where I remember finally being able to sit back and look at my oldest and realize she was coming forward. She was starting to move through those crunchy bits, and she was smiling more, and she was laughing more, and she's just a goofball. Like she really is. That was coming back, and her light was coming back, and I hadn't seen that light for a couple of years, to be honest. I hadn't realized how dim it had gotten, and I realized, I guess I was watching her and I was watching myself, and I realized that pain or that weight on my chest was starting to lift. And there's no perfect, we still have lots of work to do, but it was the realization that you're past that hump where I can start planning, not just for tomorrow, but I can start planning. So I don't think I've ever really approached life or things that are difficult with a victim attitude. And there's probably a very ugly way of saying it, and I don't mean it that way. That sounds judgy. And if you can find a better word for me, or if your listeners can find a better word, please send it in. Tell her, pass it to me. Everything's an opportunity for growth and safety and learning, and it always has been from the time I was little to going to university. All these kind of things. There's no growth. There's no benefit in sitting in the mire.
Right.
So, and I remember there was a couple of weeks there where I kept processing over. I'm like, what am I looking for? Because I realized I was at that point where the weight was gone, or not completely gone, but the weight was lifted, and I could breathe. And I started to look around me. I'm like, who am I now? Who am I now? And the biggest shift, I think, was like I was talking about, is I was finally letting go of the anger towards myself.
Right.
How did I let it get to this part? And it was freeing, because I started to realize that the biggest check I need to have in my life is, who do I want my children to grow up to be? And I realized I can use all the words in the world, but it's who I am.
Yeah.
It's who I am. So my baseline for everything, and it still holds true today, is, am I the woman that I would be honored to be a mother to?
Right.
And if I can live in a way that honors myself and is constantly trying to be a better model, support, example for both my children and your children and my friends and the people in my life, then even if I struggle and I trip and I mess up, it's going to be okay, because I don't believe that we are the last mistake we've made, or even the last success that we've had. I truly believe that we are a culmination of all of the things.
Yeah.
So that, I think, is what started my big focus on resiliency, because it's being willing to do the hard work.
Yeah.
And once you recognize and own that there's something that maybe needs a bit of crunchy work, and it's going to probably suck, and it's probably going to hurt a bit, and it's going to really require taking a very honest look at the person that we've created up to that point. That's where you start building resiliency, because it's there, but it only flows in when you choose to call for it. Right. And I called for it. And then I had to call for it in an entirely new way after another big life shift, because I had to change and I had to grow in a different way. It was like I started realizing that all the things that I thought I'd seen, I wasn't seeing. So I got the opportunity to grow again. And that's kind of where I'm in the middle of right now. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's so encouraging, because it's not telling people that they get to stay stuck. Right? Because we're all going to experience these curveballs or these plot twists, as I like to call them.
Yeah.
But you don't get to not do the thing, right? You don't get to not persevere. You don't get to not be resilient or learn or use it for good. You have to keep going. Could you explain the difference between pushing through and resiliency? Because I think sometimes we are just like, okay, this is happening, and we just push through it. But I think there's a difference, because
I agree with you.
Yeah. Could you share a little bit on that?
Yeah, sure. So when I talk about pushing through things, I think we can all kind of, a good simple analogy to that is you think about something that's physically daunting, something that's physically hard. And for people who are athletes and stuff, for me, it used to be, I guess it would be now, but now my limits of physically daunting are a little bit different than a couple of years back. Yeah. One day. But it's like you're out for your first run of the season, or maybe you're moving someone's house, or you're doing something that is physically straining and stressful, and it really pushes you to your physical max, whatever that physical max is. But your run that you only have 5 more minutes, so you push through. Right. You take a deep breath and you find that inner reserve and you push through. Yeah. There's no thinking, there's no growth, there's no goal setting, there's no learning in that moment beyond a solo, focused push for the end. You're moving someone's house, you've only got the van till 4 in the afternoon. You grab a glass of water and you push through, and you have that, and still a beneficial experience, and it still feeds into who we are, because that's where we develop our perseverance. That's where we develop, I think, also our knowledge of our own limitations, boundaries, and the fact that we can almost always go just a little bit farther. And that's powerful on its own. So when we look at building resiliency, resiliency doesn't come in that one day or in that one moment of pushing through. Maybe a culmination of 20 runs in that season where you've had to push through, and you kind of had that knowledge about yourself now that you can go a little bit farther than you maybe thought you could have before. But when I look at my perspective or my viewpoint of resiliency, I think it's where you intentionally push through and then take the time to learn from what that took and to apply it to your future movements and your future choices. And another way of looking at it is the choice to build on and fill your toolbox for whatever it is that you need. So a good example that I keep going back to in my own, kind of reflective periods and stuff, because I still am that woman who I get up at like 4:15 and I'll go to the gym because it's the safest time, and I'll take that time after I'm showering, whether it's just that time by myself or if I want to journal or something. I really do believe in setting intentions, and it can be 5 minutes with a cup of coffee. It can be, let's be honest, if you're in a killer shower, probably 10. And you take that time and you look through and what is it that I got from that experience today? And if you set your intentions for growth and filling your toolbox, that's building your resiliency. That's that awareness, not only that you can do it, but reminding yourself that these are the 5 tools I have that will help me do it the next time. So it's creating a platform and a foundation for what's to come next. And it's not just serving you in that moment, it's allowing you to build ahead for all those other possibly crunchy but amazing moments that are going to be coming up.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good. I love this. This is so good. I loved how you just lifted your children up and you praised them. I think a lot of times, not only do we get stuck, but we forget that there's these little eyes watching us, right? And looking up to us to face our fears, to face the, as you say, the crunchy things. So do you think your resiliency helped you grow in that, in being like, hey, I'm going to now be this representation that my kids need? It's no longer like just pushing through it, or it's no longer succumbing to whatever the story is or my circumstances. But I'm going to use it as an opportunity, like a springboard kind of thing.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's exactly it. I think you nailed it. I think and again, we'll preface with no one's perfect. I don't always make the right parenting choices, and I own that. But the biggest part of owning that is also being willing to talk about that. Not just with you and not just with other people, but honestly having that conversation with my children. And when I look at what is most important for building that resiliency, the pushing through is like, you can do it. Okay, you just have 2 more exams. We got this. Don't worry. Here's some chips and like whatever. That's the pushing through. And so often being that supportive person for our children. But when we look at building resiliency, it really is a very intentional process. And for something to be intentional, one of the best ways we have is to provide words that our children can use, and to make that vocabulary accessible for them. And you can model things. And I firmly believe that modeling is the number one choice, action, movement, behavior that will be seen and followed by our children. They see who you are, and they truly see who you are. So for all of us parents who think that they don't recognize or they don't have a thought or an opinion on your behaviors and your choices, they do. And they have the right to expect their parents to be not just mommy and daddy, or mommy and mommy or mommy or whatever. They have the right to expect their parents to truly be the person that they can follow. And when we talk about resiliency for our children, I talk about all of those things with the kids. I talk, not obviously age appropriate. They do not need to know full details, but even, for example, when we talked about their dad, they were little ones. So at the time, the conversation still addressed it. And it said, hey, you know what? Sometimes people struggle with their mental health, and it's very much recognizing that there's a separation between a good or a bad person. It's not that. It's somebody who is struggling with a biological basis, and then often it's circumstance and other things that are not available to them. So the conversation that we had about mental health overall was, we all struggle with things. And like for your daddy, unfortunately, he is dealing with things that are happening in his brain that don't let him be the daddy he wants to be, and he needs to focus on taking care of himself. And he knows that I'm going to take care of you. So you can love him and understand that for now he needs to focus on being Johnny as opposed to being daddy or my husband. It has to be about him right now. And we're going to support him on that. And I'm here for all of those crunchy feelings. And there were crunchy feelings, but I found that being able to talk about it gave them words to use later on when I came up. And as they've gotten older, 'cause it's been 5 or 6 years now, we don't have contact. To be completely honest, I'm not 100% sure where he is because he failed to sometimes access the supports and care that he needed. And I think a lot of that is unfortunate, and it's circumstance, and it's something that we can't control. But those words still feed into the conversations we have about our own mental health. And some of the best conversations we have, or some of the best tools I see, or the gifts that exist in our house is my children will come up and they'll say, Mommy, my social battery is done. I know you wanted me to go with you to Auntie's house, but can I just take a break?
Love that.
And that's powerful. That is powerful. But I had to also learn to listen to them. Because I have all these own thoughts in my head. I'm like, well, but I want you to be close with, my friends and all this kind of stuff. And it was recognizing that they're also their own little human beings. And if I'm asking for awareness in my workplace or with my friend group, that sometimes, hey, you know what, guys, I'm really tired today. If I'm asking for that kind of awareness and that kind of acceptance for these humans and these adults in my life to hold space for me when I'm kind of struggling with being able to be present, I kind of need to offer that to my children. And that's been really powerful. That's one of the tools that we've developed as a family, is you have the right to say, to not have to connect and not have to engage, but you have the responsibility to communicate those needs. And those are that two-part approach to everything is really, I think, the foundation of a compassionate individual who is holding space and recognizing what others may require. And the second part is recognizing what they require. And it's part of that healthy boundary building. So you have the right to not have to be present, and you have the right to have those conversations, and you have the right to be upset with me, and you have the right, all of these feelings and these emotions, you have the right to. You're a human being. But the second bit is you have the responsibility to communicate those things and your needs. And that's not just with your mom, and that's not just with mom to child. It's the relationships, the baselines that I'm hoping that they incorporate with their friendships and later on in their relationships, because too many times, and I still encounter that with adults, the assumption that I'm somehow responsible for their happiness. It's like this, and then they're frustrated with you, or they create a situation or scenario where the expectation just can't be met because what they're missing is something that they need to fill their cup with. And it has never existed outside of themselves. So in terms of developing a focus and an importance of resiliency in my own home, it's not just modeling, it's using those words and providing a vocabulary for my children to develop their own skill sets and to start to learn to collect their own little tools. One of my daughters really benefits from going for walks. It fills her cup and it gives her a good reset. My other daughter could not care less about those things, but for her, when she is struggling, she wants to draw.
Right.
And those are tools that
awesome.
fill their own cups, right?
Yeah.
So for resiliency, it's helping them start to seek out what it is that will help them self-regulate, very much so, and then plan ahead, because they know that if I like drawing and I'm having trouble, I know that I can turn to drawing for 20 minutes and it's going to help me calm down and reset myself.
Right.
Yeah, very much that. Yeah. I have learned very honestly that my tools are not their tools.
Yeah.
And that was something that took a while. Oh, it's so hard as a parent. Right. What do you mean you don't want to go for a run or wrestle with the dog or go have, a long conversation with your girlfriend? No, you don't? Oh, that's so weird. Right. But it's also allowing them to hold space and supporting them and finding what works for them. And you're right, as a parent, that's so hard.
It is. Right? Yeah.
But I think it's hard, not because we don't want them to be themselves, but it's because we want them to have the tools immediately because we love them so much.
Yes, absolutely.
But we all learn, for sure.
Yeah. And it's so important that we give them a voice. And I love what you just said, that, you've taught them to use language like my social battery is running low or it's on empty. And them having that voice is so important, because we didn't grow up in a home where we had a voice, right? It was like this seen and not heard type of deal.
And it wasn't a lack of love. It was just how our parents were raised.
Exactly. Absolutely. It's all that they knew. Yeah. So it's so powerful to be able to give them a voice, give our kids a voice now, and actually have input in what we do. And I loved what you said about how our parents, as parents, our recharge is not the same as our kids. My one daughter, hers is like arts and creating, and the other one, she's talking. She wants to tell me all the things and every detail, like it's almost like a transcript of things.
I need an hour, Mom. Let me explain to you everything that happened. Yes, exactly. I get that. And you know what? And I see in different levels, for each of them the same thing, but they come at different times. And it's also about us making sure that we take care of ourselves.
Yes.
So we can hold space for them when they have that 20-minute dialogue while you're trying to finish something on your set, and you realize you need to be able to close down the project you're working on and hold that space for them. So a big piece of that resiliency is also taking care of your business. And you'll hear this saying in my house all the time. I'm like, did you take care of your business? And it literally means that I take care of my physical, like my actual, my work. Did I set up all my projects and my programs for today? Or for this upcoming week? Did I do all my mom jobs? Like, have I bought you fresh food? Is the laundry done? And if I take care of my business, then I know that 20 minutes, I can close my computer and I can pay full attention to that 20-minute conversation about what happened, just like you do. And when you do that, you're filling their cup.
Yes.
You really are filling their cup. And when we set ourselves up for that kind of success, it's cyclical, because then when you need them as children to hear you, when you say, Sweet Pea, I cannot live your life for you.
Right.
I need you to take care of your homework. I'm here supporting you. But when it's time to take care of your business, as you see Mommy taking care of her business, I need you to take care of your business. And if it's too much, we talk about that. But if it's not, then I need you to step up. And that's the second piece is that responsibility for communication and just being responsible to what is in their life. And as they get older, same thing as for us. We continue to take on more and more, but them taking off your plate, what should be on their plate, is another great, option for them to continue to mature and grow into the young women they're becoming, or young men, depending on who we're raising, for sure.
Yeah. I love that. So good. What would you suggest for someone who is navigating this wild world of be it mental diagnoses or single parenting, not really understanding what resiliency means? What would be your words of wisdom for them?
Oh, wow. Let's see. That's a big one. But I think the concept of resiliency, I really do think it is, which is, again, another reason why I was so passionate about doing the work to put it into words and to put it into like some kind of formalized process as much as you can. Everybody's journey is slightly different. I think I want to make sure I say this correctly, or as close to correctly as possible. I think that whatever it is, okay, you wake up in the morning, and whatever it is that you are facing in that moment, whether it is the realization that you are raising these children and it's all on you, whether it's financial or the emotional growth or something else, or you wake up in the morning and you can't turn over because you're struggling with your physical health. Something's hurt. You're not sure if you're going to be able to get out of bed that day, or you wake up in the morning and you know that you don't feel right, or you know that somebody that you love is just not doing well, and it's going to be crunchy. And you're looking down the barrel as a single parent at what's coming for that day or that week or that month, and you're looking down the barrel as somebody whose body hurts, and you don't know how long it's going to be until it doesn't hurt this way. Or you're looking down the barrel of somebody who is either self-caring or trying to care for somebody. Whatever it is that you're looking ahead at, make the choice in that moment. It's not going to be perfect, but to start looking at what it's going to take to build your foundation and to build your basis of resiliency. And when I say foundation in my head, and I think most of us, we have this concept of this visual of this concrete, unmoving, impenetrable foundation. Well, those foundations crack, and they do over time, and they don't. They appear solid, and they're easy rules for us to follow in our lives. I'm this person, and I am exactly, these are my value systems, and these are who is in my life, and I'm exactly this person. And as time goes on, unless you intentionally ignore all of the new information and all of the new experiences and all of the new emotions and feelings and all the new struggles that inevitably come into everyone's life, then that foundation has to crack, and you will no longer be able to be healthy and functional and vibrant if you stick to that foundation. So if you wake up, and this is for everybody, if you wake up and your foundation no longer serves, my recommendation is to start looking at building a foundation of resiliency over that cracking foundation. And resiliency is fluid and flexible, but it is the strongest foundation possible, because when things change, it allows you to take in new information, and it allows you to choose to be a different person than the person you were yesterday. And it also allows you to hold space for that person that's coming. You don't have to be the person that other people expect you to be. They can get angry, and they will get angry because you're changing and they don't know what to do. And that's okay. That is okay. Step back and love them, but you can love them from a distance if they can't support the journey that you're on. And while an ending may not be something that you can see in a week or a month or a year, maybe the ending doesn't have to be the focus. And I think a lot of us can really relate to that when we looked at the start of the pandemic. And it's a great example, because we expected 2 to 3 weeks, and then we get back to normal. And I think a lot of us, regardless of where we're at, the individuals who refuse to really acknowledge and continue taking in information and recognizing that things are going to be fluid and they're going to continue to change, are the individuals who are going to struggle. And they're going to have a lot of cognitive dissonance. And it's going to cause extra stress and strain. Whereas I think when you look at the individuals, and this is kind of just when I'm seeing people who have not been able to flow through, I guess, with it. Whereas you see the individuals who are not perfect, but intentionally trying to take in new information and trying to reconsider and review what is actually working for them and their family, whether it's pandemic related or just personal growth related. Or healing or whatever it is. I think those are the individuals who are going to have a much bigger toolbox to address whatever's coming in the future. So for anybody who is looking down the barrel of either the most amazing upcoming month, it's 2019, or it's going to be my running meme for the rest of my life, the magic 2019, or people who are in the midst of the deepest, darkest point and they're not sure what's coming. You don't have to know what's coming, but you do have to know that you get to choose. And for all the things that are out of your control, you get to choose to start building that beautiful, fluid foundation. It has to be intentional. and you're who's building it. And that's an amazing, amazing thing. It gives you hope and it gives you power and a little bit of control in a world where quite often things feel out of our hands.
Oh, I love that. I got chills when you were talking. I was like, oh my gosh, I feel this.
2019!
Oh, that was so good. So much information was shared. I hope whoever's listening was taking notes, because I was taking notes. Is there anything else that you wanted to share that we didn't touch on? We touched on a lot.
We touched on a lot. This is a very long session. I know we were going to try and keep it shorter. My apologies to anyone who's had to
it needed to come out. It needed to be shared.
No, honestly, I appreciate the opportunity. I've told my story in different platforms, but it's always been either as part of a training session or part of a program delivery, and it's usually something that has been more cutting up specific experiences or things to best fit the specific group I was trying to provide, some teaching or training for. And I think this is the first time that I've been asked to share kind of the fulsome history of what it means to be Deb, as it were. And I really appreciate the opportunity. I was thinking about it last night, and I realized that I think too often I do the same thing that a lot of us do. We look at our lives as before and after. And we look at periods of our life as something distinct. And I think that's probably not true. It just feels that way. And when I take a step back, I needed sometimes to take 2 or 3 steps back. And I get to be this person at this point. And my history is very, very long, whereas at times it feels stunted and different. It's an amazing history, and I just look forward, and with the opportunity to share these experiences through these conversations. Keep having these conversations, please, Jyening. These conversations are so powerful. And the opportunity that you offer, to your listeners and everybody, that there are supports out there, not just for mental health, but even just for mental wellness and wellness overall. These things are true things. If we put the work into continuing to be healthy and strong on our own from wherever we're at, I think it's just going to make our future just as a society brighter and more amazing and more connected. And I hope that I continue to do that with my work, and that I continue that with our wonderful conversations. And I look forward to conversations with you by the fire, of course. And all of those great things, of course. And just as a heads up, if there's any questions or any concerns or anything that comes up, just know that I'm always here.
Perfect. So where could someone get more information if they wanted to either connect with you or connect with your business, just find out more about the resources that you've tapped into? Where would they find more information?
Sure. So, they can definitely reach out to me. I've got a website is www.gingermovements.com. I've got a link there. You've got a lot of the programming and stuff. I'm kind of creating some new programs coming up for September. We're relaxing this summer, doing more one-off events and things like that. We're also just kind of feeling things out and kind of see what the interest is and kind of what the availability is, while still keeping things COVID safe. But some things are going to become in September. If anyone's interested in programs, we may be doing some virtual stuff. But reach out. And if there's anybody who just even is having a tough time, and I know this sounds kind of outside of what most businesses and stuff offer, but it's one of the things that I really realized with prepping for us to have this conversation and just prepping kind of the programming and stuff. If you just need somebody to bounce things off of, not just you, I'm sure your listeners are the same. Reach out to Jyening, reach out, send me a message. I'd be more than happy to be that support person for you. Recognize that in our world, people really truly do want to be present for you. And if I can help you in any way to find other resources, even if it's not something that's offered through me, hit me up. I'll do my best to connect you with somebody who can provide you the support and the time that you need. Other than that, just keep on keeping on and be healthy, be happy.
I love it. Love it. Love it. Love it. So good. So good. Okay, my loves, that wraps up another episode of Or So She Thought. Thank you, Debbie, so much for taking the time just to share in the conversation and share so vulnerably about your journey. I really, really appreciate it. Please remember to rate, review, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Please also follow me on Instagram and LinkedIn and Facebook and Twitter at Or So She Thought Podcast. Or you can send me an email, or sociallythoughtpodcast@gmail.com. And until next time, please remember that you matter and to honor all the feelings and emotions that make you uniquely you. Bye.